The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio. Keep your mission on your mind and your mind on your mission. This is Mission Minded with Michael Coleman and Tony Kurre.
Happy Monday, everybody. You're like, well, why would you even put the word happy in front of Monday? Hey, man, every day is 6 feet above ground instead of 6 feet under is a good day around here. Welcome to Mission Minded. Keep in mind your mission, your mind. I am Tony Kurre along with my trusted partner, Michael Coleman. Michael, how are you, brother? What's going on?
I'm doing. Starting off the week on in good place, and glad to be with you today.
Fabulous. Let's bow our heads real quick, and let me throw in here in the middle, in the Father, Son, the Holy Spirit. Lord Jesus, you've given us another fantastic day. What a beautiful earth and a beautiful place you've given us to live and to live out your will. Please allow us to speak tonight with conviction, with joy, with compassion in our hearts. Please let us think before we speak and make sure we can move the needle when it comes to getting people to love you, Lord, and to know why you were sent to earth to die for our sins so we'd have salvation in a wonderful place called heaven. We can't wait to see you, and we love you, Lord, for everything you do for us. In your name, amen.
Amen.
We got a couple things I want to get into tonight. First, it is the 15th anniversary of the outbreak of tornadoes. I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on where you were when it happened. 348 tornadoes. We had 175 tornadoes 175 tornadoes, 348 people were killed. 238 of those were from the state of Alabama. What was so crazy about this outbreak was there were 15 Category 4s and Category 5s, which is just absolutely crazy. And, of course, whenever something like that happens, I can remember getting out of bed. I get around 3:45, 4 o'clock because I was doing a morning show. And I can remember walking outside around, I don't know, a little after 5. I got to work around 5:15, and it was green outside. And I'll never forget because it was just really, when you feel when you just know something's not right. It was green, and we got into the station, and not a whole lot happened in the immediate Birmingham area early that morning. But I do remember driving home about 10:30 that morning, and I was coming down 280, and I got off of Holly Pond Drive. And as I got off, I took a right, and I saw a woman standing in the middle of the street crying. And I thought, and this is like 10:30 in the morning, and I still did not know what had happened. We were on the air, and evidently a tornado had just gone through that area of town and took her house out. And, of course, that's before first responders could get there, anything else. And so I turned around, and then, I knew we were in for something. And then if people remember, if you didn't live here, there was a little bit of a lull during the afternoon, and then it just fired back up big time later in the afternoon. And it was unlike anything we've ever said. And, the question is, and Christians certainly can question this as well, why does God allow tornadoes to take out churches? Why does God allow tornadoes to kill the brothers and sisters that he created in his own likeness to be here on earth? Why does God cause, or why does God allow such tragedy? And of course, there's a lot of different ways you can look at it. You can say it's a fallen world. You can say it's a natural law. You can, some people say, maybe it's a call to cause more dependence on God because we need him. And it takes a natural disaster to see that we're just a grain of sand on the beach of life in this big old world of ours. And it's not nice to fool Mother Nature. God's also taught us that we can bring good out of tragedy. That's another idea. And then a lot of people just say, it's beyond our human understanding. There's some things that we can't explain. That's the supernatural. That's the amazement of God and Jesus and the mysteries that we have in our life. And sometimes we just don't need to answer questions. We can ask him all we want. We just can't answer them because we don't have the answer. But what's your thoughts on why things like that happen in this beautiful world of ours?
Well, I think I think it's all a part of a fallen. When sin was brought into the world, I do think not only just mankind, but everything God created. And it's one of those things that Paul talks about in the book of Romans. He makes reference to the earth being personified, and he talks about how the earth groans. The earth itself was not designed to have hurricanes and tornadoes and everything else, and that's part of the fallenness and the destruction that's happened. And we won't see these things because in the new heaven and new earth that the Bible talks about, when we will once again be united with God and as they were in the garden and dwell with Him in His presence, we're not going to have sin, brokenness, broken world, any of that kind of stuff. So it's I have to believe that's where that's coming from. When we talk about why does God, it always, if you just ask that question and pushed it back even further, it always comes down, well, if God's a righteous God and God's an all-knowing God and God's an all-loving God, why does God allow evil to happen? And by evil, why does He allow people to do evil things? Why do, and I used the example a couple of weeks ago about, this whole idea of free will. And in free will, somebody can choose to be a drunk driver, and then they smash into maybe a Christian mother and her 3 children and kill them all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's not that God wills that to happen, and it's not that God's detached from that. God may choose to intervene at times based on prayer. He may, based on His own plans, His own will, or He may not intervene. And that's where we come back to having to trust in the sovereignty of God, because God did not create evil. He allowed, in order to be in an authentic relationship with mankind, He just like the spiritual beings that He created had to be given free choice. And we know that some rebelled. Satan rebelled. Other angelic powers rebelled. And as a result, they've sought to destroy everything that's good and orderly. And, God is the God of order. When He created, we talked about this, that word, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That Hebrew word created means put things in order, not necessarily how we view create. If I say I created something, I created the world, you think it's something came from nothing. Now, ultimately, God did do that. I mean, God's eternal. All matter that He created, He brought about. So that's not an argument against God's creation. He actually did that, but He put things in order. Remember when it talks about the earth was without form, it was dark, all that. He put everything into order. And so God, that's how God created us and designed us until sin came. And now you have all these natural disasters, and there's no way that you could have a natural disaster and it only hit non-believers or evil people.
Sure.
When a hurricane comes in. But I will tell you that I think it's very important for us to understand when something like that, there are many, there's some obvious things like, yes, it when you go through something like that, it can kind of turn people back to God to know that life is fleeting. There's some obvious lessons that come out of that. But if you really sit back, and we can do this now in a much less emotional place 15 years later.
Yeah.
But just think about this. The whole idea, the whole illusion of control that we live in. I've heard this term, we call certain people like this that just control freaks. They want to control every aspect of their life. They want to control every aspect of their children. They're helicopter parents, and so they have to have a plan for going to the grocery store. They have to have everything has to be planned out because it's the illusion that you're in control. And when you see something like that happens, that kills hundreds of people, has such devastating effects, it really reminds us of the brokenness of this world. Yeah. And you'll see that through chaos through people. You'll see that through chaos of nature. And the idea that we are in full control of our own lives. While we have free will, the idea that we're in full control of our own lives to determine our own way is absolutely an illusion.
Yeah, I mean, the truth of the matter is we really don't. We really don't control as much as we think we do. And at least from a Christian standpoint, we realize that when we do give it up and surrender to God, that it's His will, it's His life, His plan is perfect. I will say this whenever my kids have asked that question. It's always a great question, so I know it's coming. So I always try to have a good answer. But I always say, listen, the one thing I do believe about that is whenever we do have tragedy, whether it's man-made or whether it's natural or anything, you do see the goodness in humanity. You see people crossing the aisle. You see blacks with whites and Asians with Mexicans. I mean, you see everyone start working together for a common cause, and that is to get food or clothes or whatever else is needed at a particular time. There were over 2,000 people that actually got hurt in those storms. And by the way, it caused nearly $15 billion worth of damage. And so that's a beautiful thing. That's a wonderful thing to see, and I think this country is really, really good at that. But I always say, and I say, God put us on this earth. He gave us this earth. He created it in 6 days. He rested on the seventh. And along with our free will, we've created to do things with this earth because we believe it's ours. We're just renting it while we're here. And because a lot of things we've done to this earth, we've caused a lot of problems. We've caused our own earthquakes, for example. We have, period. It's truth. We have whether you think there's global warming or climate control, whether you think it's true or not, all I know is 9 of the last 10 summers have been the hottest summers we've ever had on Earth. I don't know why. You can call it whatever you want, but whatever's happening, something's going on. We know our oceans are rising, and with that warmth comes more severe weather. I'm not going to get in an argument with a meteorologist about it, but my point is we've been placed on this earth to live our free will and do what we want, and there are consequences for everything that we do. And sometimes good things happen to bad people, and sometimes bad things happen to good people, and that's just the roll of the dice. It's not to say that, well, then why are we praying about these things? Why do we pray about it? That all comes into focus, and we realize how important that is. But that's not to say that things will happen to you that don't seem fair, because that's the way life is. And again, sometimes wonderful things happen to bad people, and again, bad things happen to good people. So it's just a matter of, but it does make you, like you said, it helps you lean even more so on our Lord and Jesus Christ, and we realize that we are just a little blip on the radar of life.
Well, let me address something you said. I've studied that issue a lot, and people are all over the map. I will tell you because here from a spiritual perspective, I think it's very important. I want to address something that you said there about climate change and global warming. When you look at statistics for the last 30 years, I remember when I was a little boy, I got scared to death in 1975 because I heard on the radio that in 25 years, that New York City would be underwater. I didn't understand that. And so, as a matter of fact, Bill Gates just recently came out and he has kind of abandoned the whole, because it was a lot of, Al Gore saying, by 2016 it's too late. We're not going to ever have any snow again. We're not going to ever have any winters. When you talk to people who've studied this, geologists and all this for a very long time, they said if you go back and look at the last 30 years, you may find, since we've been able to keep, we've only been able to do this for the last 100 and so years, be able to keep temperatures. But if you go back and actually look at it and not take a 30-year window, but actually go back to over a 2,000-year window or 11,000, even further, that relatively speaking, they will argue that the science says we're actually in a cooling period. But whether you believe that or not, my point is the idea that it's like the idea that man is causing this and we are destroying the earth is, that's something for us as spiritual people to wrestle with. I will tell you this. My view on a bigger picture of God is I was never worried about us destroying the earth with nuclear weapons. And the reason I was not is because God has determined when He's going to decide. The Father knows when He's going to send the Son back. He knows when He's going to destroy Satan. He knows all of that. And mankind's not going to catch God off guard. God is a sovereign God. He's determined when that day is going to happen. No, we don't know that. And even Jesus said He doesn't know it. And the idea that somehow we could take that away from God, that we could take control of the earth and either destroy it through nuclear weapons or whatever you want to say, I think has the element of saying, well, then maybe God's not sovereign. God, maybe the day that God's determined for all that to happen is not. And I choose to believe that. I choose to believe that God, and so I think sometimes we blend the political in with that, and I do think climate change and all of that, although you don't hear it very much anymore because Bill Gates has abandoned it and others who are pouring so much money in it has, I just think it's, we need to sit down and think that all the way through as to how we, I think it's not that climate change is itself the important issue. The important issue is how do we view God and how do we view mankind's ability to do. Now, I will say this on the flip side of that, God did give us dominion over the world, and He has asked us to rule over the earth. In essence, co-rule with Him. He's sharing power and authority, and I do think we have a responsibility to care for animals, to care for, to take care of the planet because it was created by God. It was good. It was holy, and work towards restoring what we can. But I think some people have taken that to limits that actually.
There's extremes in everything. Yeah.
The Bible says God was upset at people who worship the created rather than the Creator.
Yeah.
And so there's people who worship the earth and climate and all of that and feel like that it's all within our power without a consideration of God. And I just think that's something that's maybe it's a topic for another day to get into. But
I remember I was walking. Hackleburg was one of those cities that got just flattened. They lost I think 3,000 buildings or something like that. And we were doing something through our radio station. We had an 18-wheeler full of water, and we were driving through. And I had my son with me, and he was 4 years old. Santo was, and I was afraid that maybe it was a little too much for him to see at that age, but I thought I'm gonna give it a shot and just see, because he wanted to go and he wanted to be with his dad, and it was scary. I mean, everyone was scared what was going on.
Sure.
And we drove by and through it, and he just looked around, and his eyes were as big as saucers. And I said, "How do you feel, buddy?" And he's like, "Man," he goes, "I'm real excited, but I feel like I'm gonna puke." And I said, "That's exactly how you're supposed to feel." I said, that's perfect for you. That's where you're at. And I said, I feel the same way. I said, it's, you see the devastation unless you've actually set eyes on something like that. We had a remote, I'll never forget it. We had a remote at a tire store on the Strip. That was 3 weeks after that. It was mid-May, and I thought, certainly we're not doing this remote, right? And it was one of the only buildings that was spared on the Strip, and they'd already been paid for, and they're like, "Come on up, and we'll make a day of it." And if people want to stop by and drop off clothes or, cash, whatever, just come on up. And so we did this remote at this tire store, and there was no buildings on either side of it. You couldn't see anything. I mean, it was just flat. And I'll never forget doing a remote. I even had a hard time getting cell phone service because the service wasn't back up yet. And so it was certainly a day outside that. And in 1974, I'll never forget the super outbreak we had I was in Cincinnati, Ohio. It's out of Westchester, about 20 miles north. And that was right there with the one back in 2011, money wise and outbreak wise. But we didn't have sirens. We had civil defense things, but they weren't using them for tornado sirens yet. And so and I just remember sitting down in the basement, and I remember whenever it would clear up, we'd go out in the middle of the street, and our neighbors would come out, and 4 or 5 of us would get together, and we'd talk for a few minutes, and then as soon as it started getting weird again, we'd all go back inside, and we did that for like 24 hours. Yeah. It was crazy, and I remember my mom saying, "Okay, it's time to go upstairs and go to bed," and obviously we didn't have school for several days, and I did not want to go back upstairs. I was like, and it affected me. My dad was a newspaper distributor, and he worked out in the garage. Yeah. And so whenever I heard, we had a weather radio. That was we got a weather radio after all that went down, and it would make this just gosh awful screeching sound in the house. I mean, you could hear it from across the street, and of course it would go off. If it would go off for one township or county, it would go off every 15 minutes because the storm would continue to move. And I was like, "Can we please turn that thing?" And I remember going off one time. We had a tornado warning for Butler County, which is where we lived, and my dad was out in the garage. I said, "What are you doing?" He's like, "I'm working." And I said, "We had a tornado warning." He's like, "We'll be fine." And I said, "Did you not remember what happened, back in 1974? And of course, my dad, he was having none of it. We had a tornado probably within a quarter of a mile of our house. It was right behind my grandma's house. And so I remember looking out the window and seeing it. But yeah, he's like, "I'll be all right." I'm like, "Okay." He's like, I got newspapers to throw." I was like, "Yes, sir."
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, when the tornadoes hit in 2011, I had just really kind of had been about a year stepping into the nonprofit world, and I was actually in Orlando, Florida, at a conference, and I was with a friend of mine, and he was from Tuscaloosa, so we heard how bad it was, but couldn't picture it, and he finally got through to his wife, and his mom and dad were there, and their homes weren't destroyed, but a tree had fallen. So he's like, I better get on back. So I took him to the airport so he could go ahead and fly out. We were going to be there another day and drive back. But as soon as we got back, within a few days, we had loaded up a trailer with, I don't know, tens of thousands of pounds of water and everything else. And I remember driving in and just like Santos, just overwhelmed with just huge swaths of trees just out. I mean, just laid flat, laid bare, homes, buildings, and but I will tell you, where there was a hurricane, a Cat 5 hurricane that knocked out Mexico City about a few years ago. We all remember Katrina. One thing about this country is we get to see community. So even in the darkest of times, and you mentioned this, I think you hit the nail on the head. The power of community in the aftermath of storms that's seen is something remarkable, because we start putting the pieces back together right away, and we come together and love our neighbor. And so no matter how broken the world is, no matter what Satan is doing to attack us and disrupt the order of God, we just love conquers that by coming back together right again. And we're almost in some weird way like little ants. You go kick their ant bed, and right away they come out and they start rebuilding it. And that's how we do in our communities. It was
like that after 9/11. And if there's a silver lining to that at all, man, I remember doing so many different things on the radio station where we were raising funds for the New York and fire departments in New York City, and we did, man, every single day there was something going on where everyone was just pitching in and throwing in and praying, and it was awesome. And a lot of people would say, please don't forget what we're doing here and how we're doing it and how it feels to do it. We should be doing this every day. We shouldn't have tragedy in order to do that. So great stuff. Hey, speaking of tragedy, I know you wanted to get into this, and I did too, and I'm glad you brought it up. It's been a couple of days. The Washington Correspondents' Dinner. Cole Thomas Allen, a 31-year-old, has been charged with attempted assassination of the president, of Donald Trump. He described himself online as the friendly federal assassin. And it appears, I think he went through some court proceedings today, but another attempt on Donald Trump's life. I'm getting to the point where it was just a third one or fourth one. It's getting up there.
I think it's the third official one.
Yeah, the third official one. There's no telling how many that have been out there we don't know about. Yeah, right.
I think there's been some that are uncovered that never got off the ground, but were being either planned or close to being executed.
What we do know about this dude, he was 31. He did vote for Kamala Harris. He was a Democrat. He or at least he donated money to the Democratic Party. He donated $25 the last election. What's interesting about this guy is the first thing we want to do is we want to look into his mentality. We want to look into, was this guy bipolar? Did he have mental issues? Because we think that everyone that goes into mass shootings or walks in is dumb enough or brazen enough to do something like that. Must not all be there. The truth of the matter is it's just not the case. But in this particular case, this guy had a bachelor's degree. He went to California Institute of Technology in Pasadena. He had a master's degree. He was in a group called Christian Student Fellowship. I saw a video earlier this morning. They'd have these Nerf gun fights. I don't know what that's all about, but I don't know if it was a Nerf gun league or something he was in that he was evidently pretty good at in this Christian Student Fellowship. And looking back now, in hindsight being 2020, his teachers have said that he was a straight A guy, sat in the front row, answered questions. He was. I always people think it's funny when he was a quiet man. They always say he was a quiet man. But we also know that he got this room at the Washington Hotel on April 6th, so it was obviously very well premeditated. He had guns and knives, and he was going to wreak some havoc, man. He was going to get after it, and he almost got it done. But as far as I know, I think anyone that would do something like this has got to be crazy, and I don't mean that like, oh, you're just so crazy. I mean, something's wrong when you're willing to take it upon yourself to do something like this. And he did write a manifesto or some type of letter to his family, and his family were actually the ones that called the FBI and the CIA prior to the shooting that he had dropped a few things either through the letter or online that they were a little concerned about. But yeah, another strange situation. You want to talk about a fallen world, and I just it's befuddling to me, and it's scary. Now Donald Trump's been really good about being exceptionally accessible, which I love. It's great. He does more outdoor stuff, and he's on his own golf course, which is I can only imagine what it's like to get some type of protection on his golf course when he's out there, because anyone who plays golf knows.
Well, that's where one of the gunmen were trying to get him. Yeah,
in the bushes. So, but he also. And I remember the picture of him, when he got hit in the ear, and 1 inch on either side of it, and he's done. But with him sticking his fist up, and I thought, man, he is a tough son of a gun right there. But what's your thoughts on what happened there? Not really a surprise. And we get desensitized by these things. Hopefully we'll never be desensitized by someone trying to take our own president's life. And then, of course, we have Prince Charles and his lovely bride in town right now. So I know there was a concern there. But what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, when you just look at the state of the mental health, and I have dealt with that from all my time in the nonprofit space. When you deal with people with barriers, it's not usually just a lack of resources. You're dealing with people, and look, I'll be the first to say, I know Josh Claypo is a doctor and understands this far better than I do. So I'm not speaking at Josh's level or any other way. I'll just tell you what I've encountered in the last 2 decades of working in the nonprofit space, and I've also had some family issues as well. But there are people who are genuinely mentally ill, and these are people that are schizophrenic. You can actually examine their brains and see things that are different about their brains and or how their brains are connected and all that kind of stuff. But a lot of stuff, or I would say the vast majority of us, are what, and all of us have at times where we're like, my mental health is not great. Yeah. It doesn't mean your brain's diseased. It doesn't mean that you're, you can't adapt, or it's just you're struggling. It could be something that happens at work, it gets you down. It could be a relationship or you could get in these manic phase, on and on and on. And usually that alone does not cause violence. I mean, just because you are suffering depression or anxiety disorders or schizophrenia, usually you don't see people become violent. Mm-hmm. And so one of the questions I keep asking myself is, if mental health itself is not causing violence, then how does it all link together? And I think what you're seeing are people who are wrestling with their mental health. They may sometimes feel like, hey, I don't have a sense of belonging. I'm trying to connect to something greater than myself. Some people turn towards God and they find that fulfillment. I certainly did that when I was trying to connect something bigger than myself and encountered Christ and surrendered my life to Him. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of people who are looking for something greater, and it leads them. They're very susceptible to things such as, if you just look at cult activity. I mean, he belonged to a group, but a lot of the behaviors they're already associating with, like these manifestos mm-hmm. that a lot of people, the Unabomber, on and on and on. Very smart people. And, there's so they are influenced by their worldview or by something going on. And
The Unabomber, you brought the Unabomber. He was dead straight on what you're talking about. I mean, he was brilliant, man. Had 167 IQ, and I mean, this guy was something really, really special. Even missed some grades because he was so smart. But to continue, to your point, he was very dangerous in that he just did not like the idea that technology was taking over the world, and had a real issue with it. And that's one of the reasons he moved out in the woods. But continue. But again, another brilliant man.
Look at Timothy McVeigh that blew up, the Oklahoma Federal Building, and you say, well, Timothy McVeigh was crazy. I don't think Timothy McVeigh was crazy. I think he had become radicalized he had some disappointments in life, some frustrations. He became anti-government, and he coordinated with people, and he was trying to make a statement. Now, you and I, we would sit down and go, if I'm frustrated with our laws, or if I'm frustrated with what's happening, we're not going to think about going out and striking against that entity, whether it's state, federal, local, whatever. We typically don't do that. But if you are in a certain state where it's not that you're mentally ill, but you might have some mental health issues. But anyway, you see the solution as being this, and it takes you in a radical direction. And once you go down that rabbit hole, it can be incredibly difficult to pull yourself out of it. And I think more often than not, that's what happens. And you think, well, how do we get here? Well, one of the things that I think is really hurting us, that I think happens on both sides of the aisle, is our weaponization of language. Trump and Trump's followers. Just the other day, Robert De Niro called everybody who voted for Trump, so roughly 80 million people. He's like, I don't want you to come to my shows. You're a bunch of lunatic, hillbilly, whatever. I forgot all the things he said.
Yeah.
But Nazi loving, and we've gotten to where we can't even disagree or sit down and have a calm discussion. And then you get somebody like this and he gets so radicalized, and he genuinely believes he's doing something good for society. As the guy who killed the CEO from Health South.
Yeah.
I mean, he's standing there. He's just waiting on him to go by, and he had some disagreements with Hunt. So here's a man who's a father. I don't know what kind of man he was, but he was the CEO of a company, just walking down the street, had a family, and he was doing his job. You could say the healthcare system is broken. It's not right. It's not fair. But how does that lead somebody, that radicalization that says, well, this is what I'm going to do about it? And I don't think these people are crazy. I think they get radicalized by
maybe temporary insanity. I agree with you. I think some of them are actually brilliant. That makes it even scarier. That we're dealing with that. It's easy to sit there and say, well, they got mental issues and they weren't on their medication and blah blah blah. But I mean, these are, and we think that just because you're smart, you should be able to rationalize, the way you're feeling and the way you do things, and you're smart. You're smart. You don't do dumb things. And that's obviously not what's happening here. I do wonder sometimes though too. And you were talking about radicalization. Radicalization. Yeah. I always wonder. Is that a course? Like, how long does that take? I've got two friends of mine who were actually part of a cult. It was a cult, period. When I was living in Cincinnati, this is years ago, and as long as the day is long, they just didn't see it while they were in it. I mean, we were like, what are you doing? What's going on? And these were really smart, compassionate Catholic, really went to our church, super nice guys. And it was amazing because it was like the switch went on or something. And then as quickly as that switch went on, once they kind of came out, the switch went back on. They look back on it. They're like, I cannot believe I actually thought that way. I can't believe I actually felt that way. I can't believe I actually was wanting to join this group. I can't believe I was willing to give up my wife and my children to this group and give all my money to this institution, which, obviously was a religious one. But it's funny because, and I still talk to them, but I mean, I bring it up sometimes. They're like, I don't know. It was like they were going through some type of acid run or something, man. Like they just totally lost for a while. And I wonder, how often that happens, because it seems like when you want to politicize something like that, or you want to get radical, it would take a period of time to make that happen. What surprises me, though, is the fact that this guy was part of a Christian student fellowship. I don't know how well he was involved in it. I don't know how long he was in it. But you just don't usually see that. I mean, we're doing a Christian show right now, and that's just pretty bizarre.
Well, you and the audience, you and me, we're sitting down saying, so if you're going to Christian, let's just say you're at least maybe open to the idea, and you're like, but there, how does it go to where you're trying to kill the president? Mm-hmm. But when you are in that state, and if you get around people. And again, you're you're searching for meaning. You're trying to find purpose. You may feel adrift. And then all of a sudden somebody says something, and in their mind, it explains why they've had such difficult times. So you've seen people become radicalized against the government because they believe, that's why everything keeps happening. It's the government, and you'll see conspiracy theories everywhere. You see that in cults like David Koresh, out at Waco, Jim Jones when they went to Guyana, on and on and on, and that's where they got the saying, "Drinking the Kool-Aid."
That was crazy.
And
man.
you're like, how does he get 900 people plus to drink cyanide-laced Kool-Aid?
They're lost sheep, aren't they?
And so we have such and this doesn't help it, but we have such a fragmented mental health care system. We remember, there used to be a mental hospital over in Tuscaloosa, and they said they're shutting that down, and they said, we're just going to put people back in their communities, and we're going to let communities, soak up the care for those people. But our communities were underfunded. We did not have the proper training. We didn't know, what we're looking for and how to respond. And so there's just not a lot of help for people in these states. Like you said, I've encountered people where I'm like, they're just as mild-mannered as they can be. And I don't see her for a year or two, and I sit down and I'm like, something's changed.
Yeah.
This person is angry. They are resentful. They are hyper-focused on a person or an entity, and it can just consume their minds. And it's really now. When I think about that, you say, okay, because what you hear police say is, hey, if you see this, early detection and letting people know about this kind of stuff may save lives. But think about it just for a second. We have a lot of people. We have absolute freedoms in this country, and so just because somebody comes across as being different to you doesn't give the authority to police to come in and take weapons from them, to invade their home, to even search for weapons. Otherwise they're getting up going to work every day, but they may be plotting all these things I will tell you, about 3 years ago, I had an employee. He went home, was living with his mom and dad. He was a young man, 21 years old. Went inside after work. They said, "How was work?" He said, "Great, nothing, no problems." 5:30 or so, he leaves. He says, "Hey, I'll see you guys later." And, he had a smile. Everything was fine. And he ended up going to a parking garage and shooting himself in the head.
Wow.
And there was no way to tell. So I talked to a counselor about, this, was there a way? And they said, well, lots of times, once somebody decides what they're going to do, like they put a plan in place, you'll see them smile and joke because the pressure's off. They know what they're going to do.
And I've had our discussions with Dr. Claypo about that. That's true. If you know someone's having some mental issues and all of a sudden they look like they're just, not high as a kite or anything, but all of a sudden they're true to their convictions. They know what's going to happen. It's taking it.
Yeah, they just like they're having a good day. Yeah. And when he left work that day, so I'm like, how does somebody? I mean, we care about people we work with. We care about our neighbors. You see somebody smiling, having a good day. Like, let's say he's been depressed. He's been struggling with stuff. Well, now he's having a good day. Well, you're encouraged. Oh, that's great. You're having a good day. And you have the idea of early detection sometimes, and being able to bring authorities into a point that they can actually affect that or have the power to affect that is incredibly challenging.
Yeah. The Mental Illness National Institute says that roughly 1 in 5 Americans live with a mental illness. Annually, 46% will experience a diagnosable condition in their lifetime, and approximately 6%, by 15 million people, suffer from a very serious mental illness. Having had some mental things I've had to deal through myself, and I thank goodness that I got on. There's wonderful medications out there, and it helped me out. But my former mate had all kinds of issues with it. My mom suffered from mental depression for over 50 years of her life. That was kind of before therapy and stuff like that. Well, I guess what I'm saying is, we always want to say, particularly in athleticism, with our leagues, if you've got something that you can't deal with, you're not tough enough. Particularly when you're an athlete, and it just absolutely has nothing to do with that. And it's unfortunate when people are crying out or need help. Sometimes life just gets tough, and when it's a clinical thing, something in your brain, you're having a chemical imbalance. You can do anything you want. You can win the lottery, and you're going to off yourself. It doesn't matter. So that's certainly something that, and I think it's getting more progressively worse because I think we're living. There's a lot more going on. I would say it's more difficult to live now than it was in the past when things are more simple. We didn't realize all the inadequacies we had back in those times. Now things are so, you talk about Uber and all the things, and you have things delivered and everything else. But I mean, life's hard.
Think how many people left the United States and Western European countries and were radicalized by ISIS. Mm-hmm. And
girls, young women, I've seen groups of 4 18-year-old girls that were going to college. There was a group of Alabama that did it. And and I'm like, how is that even possible? They're from well-to-do families in Mountain Brook, and all of a sudden they're not part of ISIS. It's like, what in the world? And I say lost sheep. I'm not kidding. It's when someone's willing to go to those lengths to change their life and get radical, they're looking for a bigger cause. They're looking for something to be part of that's bigger than themselves so they can feel important. Not all the time, but a lot of times. And unfortunately, someone would say, well, my gosh, she's a Mountain Brook girl getting straight A's. Why in the world would she want to be part of ISIS? I don't know.
Yeah. I don't think it helps today to get in our echo chambers. That because the news is so split, we've determined, okay, this is left-leaning news, this is right-leaning news. So if you're conservative, you tend to trust the Fox News. If you're liberal, it's, MS Now or whatever. And so if you are get interested in something, or let's just say you're very influential right now, or have the ability to be influenced, and then you get in that, and then so you're not you tend to stop listening. And I get it. Look, it can be maddening when you're listening to news when you feel like it's being distorted. And so you're like, I'm not going to listen to that. So we tend to, on our phones and on our TV, we listen to news and we listen to people, podcasts, on and on and on, that kind of agree with us. The problem is when you're in that echo chamber and you no longer even open yourself up to a discussion on the other side, then it feels like, well, everybody in the world, like I'm seeing this the way everybody in the world sees it. And then all of a sudden, if you see the world different than Trump, and then Trump comes up and he's like, wait a minute, how do you get elected? Everybody agrees. And it's because of the echo chambers that we place ourselves in. And so when that's become your whole world, on the right or the left, when politics drives you, and you're like, well, how did he get to be in office? And this is a travesty, and I want my life to matter, and so my life's going to matter. I'm going to fix this great wrong, and save the world. And the way people get there, like I said, is not because they've already gone insane. They're thinking, they know what they're trying to do. It doesn't make sense to people who are not in that state of mind. We can't rationalize it. It doesn't make any sense. And so it does seem absolutely crazy to us. But I think most people who do that, that's why you tend to not be able to get off through, Hinckley was the one exception. Mm-hmm. But if you remember, he was all crazy about Jodie Foster and was obsessed with her and was trying to impress her. And it wasn't because he hated Reagan. No. But trying
to impress her, yeah.
Yeah. And so that was a whole different level of mental challenges.
You bring something up really interesting, because we talk politics. I know in the show prior to us, they talk a lot more politics than I do, and I'm fine with that. I think we can talk in circles sometimes, and particularly we know where the majority of people lean in this state. But what people don't realize is there was no political radio until about 35 or 40 years ago. Right now, you can turn your dial almost anywhere, and you're going to hear as much political radio as you probably will country radio, which is crazy in itself. Back in 1987, the FCC abolished the Fairness Doctrine, which basically said that you had to give fair and balanced reporting on both sides of the aisle. And as soon as that requirement ended, you saw the Rush Limbaughs and some of the other guys coming in and allowed conservative talk, and then, of course, liberal talk as well. But you look at it now, and it's like, you can't go up and down the dial at all without someone talking politics, and it's just gotten so big and so important to so many people. It's almost difficult to have a conversation with anybody anymore and not talk about politics. I can't remember the last time, and I'm 60 years old. I go back to like the 80s when I was like 16, 17, 18 years. You didn't hear anything about the president ever, unless something was going on, unless there was a GMP thing or there was a vote or we didn't have all the political commercials. We didn't have all that. We didn't go back to the 80s, man. And you would go 2 or 3 weeks without hearing anything about Ronald Reagan or about Jimmy Carter or about, And now, every single day, and I'm sure he's loving it, but every single day, Donald Trump's in the top of the news heap. Every single day he's doing something and it's newsworthy. So you got to report on it. Every single day is something newsworthy.
Well, it's a 24-hour news cycle. It
really is. You're right.
It's crazy. Yeah. But I think even people who become, let's say, I know lots of people who only watch Fox News. I know other people who only watch MSNBC. Now, and they are not radicalized. They have a particular perspective, but that alone, I don't think radical. It's really when a lot of these factors, these risk factors, start clustering together that we were talking about. Mm-hmm. So you have somebody who's going through some type of personal crisis. It could be a loss. It could be a failure. He was 31 years old. There was a picture of him from, I think, 10 years ago. He was actually a NASA intern or something, something along those lines. Again, plenty smart, but he was with an attractive girl, and they showed this. I don't know if there was some sort of rejection issue, but you have personal crisis, and then you combine that with fixation on somebody or some event. Then if you have social isolation, and then like ISIS, you get exposed to these violent ideologies. I mean, we don't need to look any further than the radicalization of Islam and Sharia law and all that kind of stuff, and what that's done and how dangerous that is. An example would be when Iran killed, between 30 and 40,000 of their own citizens for protesting against the government, and just gunned them down, hung them, all the different ways they did it. And from birth, a lot of people are taught, these radical things. It doesn't feel radical to them. It feels like they're being loyal and faithful to God. And when you just, again, look at the environments, look at what's being fed into them, look at all these clusters of issues when it comes together, then a lot of people just fall prey to that, and they can't pull themselves out of it. It's really sad.
I don't get it, brother. I don't get it. I mean, I know I don't, but and I know I'm Christian, so I'm not part of that. But I mean, living a life where you can laugh and have fun and enjoy a bird singing on a telephone wire, and not having to worry about things, and let God take care of your problems and surrender to Him. I mean, He's making life about as easy as possible for us to live under His will, and to be doled out and filled with hatred and these ideologies of we all live in fear or in love, one of the two. It just seems like it wouldn't be very fun. It just when I actually went through a situation today that was exactly that. I was in one corner and someone else was in another corner, and I am letting everything just water off the back. I'm not going to let this get me. I'm not going to let this person steal my thunder, steal my joy. And this person was just the most bitter person that I have ever seen in my life. And I was like, wow. I said, sleep well tonight. I'm not going to worry about it. My faith is strong enough that I know I'm doing the right thing. And so, when you're living right, it feels pretty good. It's easier to give things up to God when you know you're living right. But that is what it is. All right, just got about a minute left. What you doing later on this week? Oh, by the way, Justin Brown, my good friend, this is going to be a really interesting show tomorrow night. I'm going to have to be really, really careful because Justin Brown was my roommate for 3 years back in the 90s at Green Valley Apartments. I know he's going to freak out when I bring that up because we were different men back in the 90s as we are now. And Justin does middays and afternoons on WDJC. So he's doing nice Christian radio, his own thing. So he's the one that was actually instrumental in getting the show for Michael Coleman and Tony Kurre. He helped us get our foot in the door there. And so he's going to be joining me as a co-host tomorrow. So I'm looking forward to that. And then we'll have Dallas Teague back on Wednesday, and you'll be back on Thursday. So looking forward to having my partner back in here. I love you, brother, man. Have yourself a good night. Great stuff.
All right, buddy. You too.
I'll talk to you in a little bit.
All righty.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.